welcome back. Thanks for joining me for a vermicomposting episode. This week I'm starting with my mid-harvest bait tray, and I'm a little disappointed because the worms have disappeared yet again. And unlike the first time, the bin was not dry. I didn't see any evidence of the worm population decreasing. It's like when I started the harvest, the worms just disappeared. I'm doing one final check through the castings. I really don't see any worms. And again, I'm hoping that that means that there's a lot of juvenile worms and a lot of cocoons that I'm not seeing. So rather than completely giving up on this bin, I'm going to try to revive it. With this bin, I am going to just let the castings sit for a little bit. I'm not going to sift them. I'm not going to do anything to them. I just want to see if I come back to this in a couple of weeks, if there will be worms hanging out when I do sift it. So I'm just going to set this to the side. For the few worms that were in here, as well as the food, I'm going to add it to the bin where I put last week's worms that I baited out. There aren't a lot, but again, I can see that there's activity because across the top there are a few castings, so I know that I did get some worms out of it, and most of them are hanging out in the banana peel, but definitely not the volume of worms that I know was in this bin prior to baiting. So despite your best efforts, you can see that sometimes things just happen. Worm colonies tend to come and go, but like I said, I am holding out hope that the worms are just in a state of transition and that there's a lot of cocoons that need to hatch and the wisps need to come out before giving up hope and ordering more. So I didn't add any more food or grit to this bin, just added the food from the bait tray. And then my plan is, with moving to the Vermibag Mini, taking the worms from this one and using transplants. So in checking the environment in this bin, it's normal. It is wet in the middle and dry on the outsides, but again, being that it's midsummer, it is very humid in my area, so the bins are all running more humid. So I'm putting the bait tray in the middle of this bin, and I'm going to feed around it as well as over on the sides. I don't want to take a whole bunch of worms. I just want some to divert into the bait tray so I can restart the colony. So I'm putting some bananas in the one side and some watermelon and banana in the other, and giving it its grit, and hoping that this bait method will revive the other Vermibag tote, as well as feed the bin up for another week, and that completes the update for this particular bin. Moving on to my regular totes, which were just harvested a few weeks ago. The castings in this bin are looking good. Again, they dry out on the top, but when you go down to the level right under, they are holding water, and I believe it has a lot to do with the summer. Again, we have had such humid weather, and all my bins are holding a lot more moisture than normal. So when I go through the castings, the worms seem to be spread throughout. They're doing really well. I have evidence of activity on the side that I feed, and all the food is gone. But since there are still a lot of cardboard pieces in here, a lot of food sources still for them, I'm still holding back on giving them a larger than normal feeding. So I'm just going to put a couple banana peels or banana slices in here and give it its grit. And this will be this bin's feeding and update for this week. The sister bin for the regular tote is also showing the same conditions. Where the side is fed, the worms are hanging out more even though they're all throughout. And you can see evidence of worm activity right across the top, but still, I focus on fluffing this right now because I don't want the castings to get muddy at the bottom because the moisture is so high in the air that it is affecting all of the bins. So once I give this a good mix, since it does as well have a lot of food particles still in here from the castings that I added, I'm going to give it a smaller feeding and then finish this up with the grit and set it up for the next week. And the last bin, which is one of my Vermi bag totes, this bin I added castings to. It was harvested around the same time as the other regular totes, and I just added more castings to this one as I wanted to increase the content inside of the bin. So with this one as well, which is quite unusual, the castings are super wet in here, and for a Vermi bag tote that is not the norm. So again, I make sure to thoroughly mix all my castings so that the moisture doesn't collect at the bottom. And here's some worms that were hanging out in the banana peel, so they're happy and looking really healthy. So with this as well, since there is so much left in terms of food, cardboard, and everything, I'm going to give this a small feeding as well, and then set this up for the next week. And it doesn't look like for a while I will have to add any additional water to any of these bins as they are running on the wetter side, but I'm going to keep an eye on that from week to week. But once I put the grit and the cover it back up for this one, this bin is set up for the next week. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. Please like and subscribe. As always, I do hope you enjoy the content, and thank you so much for watching.